Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. The assassination attempt by Lewis Powell against Secretary of State William Seward on the night of April 14th, 1865, while not far away, John Wilkes Booth was shooting President Abraham Lincoln. The episode's well documented by historians. The vicious knife attack by Powell against Secretary of State Seward left him with multiple stab wounds in the face and the throat. Minutes before the attack, when Seward's son Frederick, who is pictured here, confronted Powell, he suffered a brutal beating while trying to stop Powell from getting into the room of his father. His father, by the way, had been seriously injured in a carriage accident, so was pretty immobile at the time that Powell attacked him. Frederick, or Fred as he was known to his friends, tried his best to stop Powell, but suffered a brutal beating as a consequence. Fred recounted those tense moments, those tense minutes before the attack of his father. In 1867, 2 years after the assassination, during the trial of John H. Surratt, the son of Lincoln conspirator Mary Surratt, who was hanged for her crimes in 1865. I want to read you an excerpt from the proceedings where Fred Seward gives his testimony. It's a chilling account, and it's not often discussed. So, and I think that's partly because all the focus is, rightly so, is on Lincoln and Seward's father. So here's the eyewitness account of Fred of his participation that night of April 14th, 1865. So I'm going to begin at a point in his testimony after the interviewers have asked him a bunch of basic questions about that night. We'll gloss over all that because it's well known where he was. He was in the family home. He was aware of Ford's Theater, all of that. So here's the passage, the relevant passage about the confrontation with Lewis Powell. So he says, quote, about 10 or a little after 10 o'clock that evening, I heard the sound of some person coming up the stairs. I stepped into the hall to see who it was. At the head of the stairs, I met a man wearing a hat with a light overcoat, well dressed and tall, who said that he was a messenger from Dr. Verdi. Dr. Verdi is his father's physician. He either said so or William Bell did. William Bell was one of the servants in the house. Seward continues, I cannot now recall which. William Bell, I will state here, came up with him. The man said that he was instructed by the doctor to deliver some medicine to my father and to deliver it personally. I cannot recall the words or expressions that either of us used, but the substance of the conversation was that I told him that we were endeavoring to compose my father to sleep and did not therefore want him disturbed, and that I would take the medicine and give it to him. To that he replied that the doctor's orders were that he should see him personally. I made objections, and he insisted. I went over the ground, I think, several times with him, the conversation lasting perhaps 3 or 4 minutes. He, Powell, made the impression upon me of being a man rather dull of comprehension and as having no desire other than to obey his orders literally. Finally, I said, it is not worth while to talk any longer about it. You cannot see Mr. Seward. I will take the responsibility of refusing to let you see him. Go back and tell the doctor that I refused to let you see him if you think you cannot entrust me with the medicine. I am Mr. Seward and in charge here. He will not blame you if you tell him I refused to let you see him. He, Powell, hesitated a moment and then said, very well, sir, I will go, or words to that effect. Powell turned about and, as I supposed, proceeded to go downstairs. He stepped down, I think, 1 or 2 steps, and I had turned, or was about turning, to go to my room when a noise behind me occasioned me to turn and look back. I found that he had turned back and was springing up the steps with a pistol in his hands. The next moment, he was at my side with the pistol at my head. There was no time for thought or reflection. I remember only thinking at that moment that there was an additional reason why he should not go in. I did not go so far as to logically make out what the object was. I remember noticing the shape of the pistol, which was that of a Navy revolver. The next instant, I heard the click of the lock and then remembered to have thought, well, the pistol has misfired. Then, instinctively, I raised my hands to take hold of him. A struggle ensued, and after that, my recollections became indistinct and blurred. But as near as I recalled, I felt my right hand pressing against the wall, I presume to save myself from falling, and that putting my left hand to my head found a hole in my skull. I'm going to pause for a moment to tell you that what Powell did is he slammed the butt of the pistol against Fred Seward's head, inflicting a serious injury to his skull. So Seward continues about Powell's brutal attack. Fred says, then I suppose, from what I have learned since, though I did not know it at the time, that he got into my father's room by his pushing against me and I against him, both stumbling and falling into the room together. In the room, the gas was turned low. That's the gas light. But the gas in the hall was bright. Having been partially stunned by the blow that he had given me, I have only an indistinct remembrance of what took place there, except that there was noise and confusion, voices and struggling. The only distinct remembrance that I have about it is of seeing 2 men lift my father from the floor. I noticed that his face was bloody and that the blood was streaming from his throat. And I heard one of the men say to the other, "He is not dead." This was said in a low tone of voice. Then I turned and walked, or staggered, to my own room and met on the way my brother having 2 cuts in his forehead, from which I saw the blood streaming. His brother was also attacked. I went back to my own room and laid on the lounge to wait for medical assistance. After that, I gradually fell into a coma. A state of stupor came over me by degrees, like as if I were falling to sleep. I remember seeing the doctors and members of the family come in, but I found myself unable to communicate with them distinctly, as I could not articulate. I saw nothing further of the man who made the attack and have no distinct recollection of what happened after that until I began to recover. The interview then asked another question. You were not present at the trial of the conspirators? Seward answered, no, sir. Then another question. When did you begin to recover? Fred's answer. I think it was in June when I was first able to ride out, possibly July. I think it was October that I was first able to resume my duties. So there you have it. Fred Seward's eyewitness account at the 1867 trial of John H. Surratt of his efforts to stop Lewis Powell from attacking his unsuccessful attack to stop Lewis Powell from attempting an assassination against Fred's father, William H. Seward. That was on the night of April 14th, 1865. Fred did recover from his injuries, as did Secretary of State Seward. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.